The Australian National Department of Young Scholarly Researchers, known as ANDES, have explored the country of the Ukraine and the impact that globalisation has had, and if any Australian firms should consider expanding there. This video will delve into the country of the Ukraine and provide an in-depth analysis of the impact of globalisation, an assessment on the country's current economic and HDI developments, and provide a critical analysis of some of the key issues for an Australian firm in their international expansion. To begin, let's explore a brief background on our chosen country. The Ukraine is located in Eastern Europe, bordered between Europe and Asia. It shares a border with Russia, Belarus, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Moldova. The Ukraine has a population of 43.83 million people, with the median age at 40.5 years. The total size of the country is approximately 603,700 square kilometres, making this the largest country entirely within Europe. The general terrain consists of plains containing the Ukrainian fertile black soil, giving the Ukraine a strong agricultural base and a large quantity of natural resources. The official language is Ukrainian, though a large proportion of the population are bilingual, speaking both Ukrainian and Russian. The Ukraine became a part of the World Trade Organization in 2008 and signed an association agreement with the EU in 2014. This agreement meant the Ukraine joined a free trade area, and the EU agreed to provide them with political and financial support and access to European markets. As with the majority of countries around the world, the Ukraine has felt the influence of globalization. Although there is a discrepancy among scholars as to the definition of globalization, Joshua 2008 believes it encompasses the spread of technology advancements, receding national constraints, and increased dissemination of ideas and cultures. Through this analysis, we'll look at both the positive and negative effects globalization has had on the Ukraine. Firstly, there's been many benefits globalization has brought to the Ukraine, such as the increased ability to trade and export. Since becoming part of the deep and comprehensive free trade area in 2016, the country has seen a large rise in its amount of goods exports, rising from 14 billion euros in 2015 to 20.2 billion in 2017. This increase in export can contribute to a higher GDP and potential growth in job rates to cater for the increase in production needs. This ability to trade has also led to a huge expansion of technology within the country. As of 2017, it is estimated that 21% of Ukraine's imports is related to machinery. This includes wiring, broadcasting equipment, computers, telephones, and other electrical goods. The heavy influence that these imports have had on the country can be reflected in the rising number of internet users, from only 3.7% in 2005 to 44.1% in 2016. According to Chandra 2006, new technologies will help the Ukraine with higher work productivity, access to news and ideas, as well as educational benefits. However, there has been some detrimental effects upon the Ukraine as a result of globalization. Uncertainty surrounding national borderlines is a potential issue that globalization can create. According to Rembold and Carrier 2011, the ambiguity as to the borders surrounding the Ukraine and Russia's involvement in the country has led to clashes, violence, and even deaths. In 2014, the newly elected president Viktor Yanukovych began to sway more towards the Russian Federation and began breaking ties with the EU. Anger towards this new move was felt in the western areas of the country and led to 100 killed in a protest across the nations. These protests led to the election of Petro Poroshenko, a president that sided with the EU. The move then led to widespread violence and military action across the country. Over 9,000 has been killed under the military campaign since 2015. Another issue that globalization has contributed to is a population decline in the Ukraine. According to Monk 2009, globalization has led to easier access to emigration with its ability to relax laws surrounding entry and exit into countries. As Ukraine is still a developing nation, many citizens choose to go to countries with higher quality of employment and life. For over 20 years, the nation's population has been steadily decreasing, losing over 150,000 people a year. A decline in population may have detrimental effects on GDP and overall growth of the nation. So, weighing up these options, it seems that the negatives outweigh the positives in the case of the Ukraine. Although technology and increased exports have provided to be a benefit to the country, the violence, death, and destructions of lives cannot be outweighed by these. Furthermore, as the population continues to decline, there will be no one left to utilize the benefits that globalization can bring. Thus, the Ukraine can be seen as overall a loser of globalization. The Human Development Index provides fundamental information in regard to the people of a country's freedom, their opportunities, and essentially their quality of life. To provide some perspective, Australia is ranked number 3 in the world, with a HDI of 0.939, and the lowest is Niger, ranked 189 with a HDI of 0.54. Through looking at this scale, it can be concluded that the Ukraine is considered relatively highly ranked as a country with high levels of human development deriving from its HDI of 0.751. Ukrainians' life expectancy at birth is 72.1 years. Their educational attainment is 15, and their average income per year is $8,130. At a glance, the Ukraine appears to be an attractive country for international business and investment. They possess high qualified and inexpensive labour, opulent natural resources, and a valuable geographic location which makes them fascinating to international countries. There is plenty of opportunities for business in the Ukraine. However, according to a study by the World Economic Forum in 2016, the 5 most problematic factors for entering into business in the Ukraine were corruption, political instability, inflation, inefficient government bureaucracy, and access to financing. As a result, the country lacks the ability to make use of their own resources and therefore struggle to attract sufficient foreign investment. Additionally, the Russian military intervention has caused the political, economic, and social situation of the Ukraine to become unstable. Alongside this, the country faced its longest decline in economic activity between 1990 and 1999, only slightly increasing its IFDI over the years of 2010 to 2015, facing many economic problems in between. During their economic decline, Ukraine experienced high levels of hyperinflation, a considerable decline of output, and low access to finances. In recent articles published in 2019, experts suggest that after 4 years of turmoil, the Ukraine's volatile economy is slowly being stabilized. Positively, GDP is showing slight growth per quarter, and additionally, the income of Ukrainians has increased by almost 25% compared with the previous year. It is suggested that 2019 will bring moderate economic growth, and as a result of severe economic crisis over the last 5 to 10 years. However, as a result of this, Russia has responded to the stability with severe hostility. This, alongside many years of economic instability, may suggest that investment in the Ukraine is still unadvised. From the perspective of an Australian firm, the economic development of the Ukraine is of greater significance than human development. Due to the Ukraine's past economic instability, it is essential for Australian firms looking to invest to understand the prior patterns of their economic performance to make an adequate and informed decision as to whether or not they will be successful in the investment. Now let's move on to discussing the cultural differences between the Ukraine and Australia, using Hofstede's cultural dimensions. Power and distance is the degree to which unequal distribution of power and wealth is tolerated. In the Ukraine, the power holders are very distant in society, meaning Ukraine obtains a score of 92. The Ukraine has been developed as a very centralized country. The difference between the powerful and the less powerful comes down to the status symbol. Behavior between people must always reflect the status roles in all areas of business, whether it be visits, negotiations, or general cooperation. This approach can be seen as top-down. Power distance in the Ukraine is characterized as poorer countries with a small middle class. There seems to be a high degree of power distance in countries where corruption has occurred, and this is the case for the Ukraine. In comparison to Australia, with a score of 36, this is due to Australia having hierarchy more for convenience rather than power. All employees and managers would be approached with decisions, and information is shared to all those involved, rather than being exclusive. Uncertainty and ambiguity is the extent to which people are threatened by a lack of structure or by certain events. Ukraine scoring a 95 means that they are threatened by ambiguous situations. Ukrainians foster good relationships with friends and acquaintances, and in due course will be formal and distant when interacting with strangers. Australia scores a 51 on this dimension, concluding that we are neither phased on either spectrum. However, Australians are seen to come across more relaxed and less distanced to new interactions. Individualism can be seen as the degree to which a culture emphasizes individual goals over collective goals, or vice versa. In the Ukraine's case, relationships are crucial for obtaining information, getting introduced, or successful negotiations. Relationships in the Ukraine need to be personal and trustful before one can focus on tasks. Masculinity is a preference in society for achievement, heroism, assertiveness, and material reward for success, or a preference for cooperation, modesty, caring for the weak, and quality of life. Ukraine's people within workplaces or to strangers rather understand their personal achievements and successes. Modesty and caring for the weak is only shown from dominant characters, such as a boss, but other than that, it is not accepted traits amongst peers. Long-term orientation is the preference to maintain time-honored traditions and norms while viewing societal change with suspicion, or preference to take a more pragmatic approach that encourages thrift and efforts in more education as a way to prepare for the future. Ukraine do not seem to have a strong lean towards either of these orientations. Australia, alternatively, received a score of 21 on this dimension. This means Australia has a normative culture and prefers to establish truth, honour traditions, and achieve quick results. Indulgence. Relatively free gratification of basic and natural human drives related to enjoying life and having fun, or suppression of gratification of needs and regulates it by means of strict social norms. Ukraine society does not put a huge emphasis on leisure and freedom time, and generally control the gratification of their desires. Ukraine has a low score of 18 on this dimension. It can also be seen that they are restrained from social norms, and potentially indulging in things can be seen as wrongful. In democratic Ukraine, the citizens did not enjoy freedom of movement. Australia has scored 71 on this dimension. This relates to Australians wanting to fulfill desires in regards to enjoying life and having optimistic outlooks on life. Australia's high score also factors in their ability to spend more disposable income on leisurely desires. Now let's move on to comparative advantage. The principle of comparative advantage, proved by David Ricardo, is the fundamental analytic explanation of the source of these enormous gains from trade. Comparative advantage refers to an economy's ability to produce goods and services at a lower opportunity cost than that of trade partners. So according to David Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage, the Ukraine should specialize in industries that they are most efficient in when looking to trade with other countries. It has been shown that the Ukraine specializes in the production and export of labor-intensive goods. Ukraine's abundance of labor is the primary factor determining its export structure. Other factors that affect the trade structure are labor productivity and non-tariff barriers. Globally, the Ukraine specialization is most pronounced in the production of railway and trolley locomotives, ferrous metals, fertilizers, and grains. The Ukraine's revealed competitive advantage are in ferrous metal production. The ferrous metal industry is of high importance to the Ukrainian economy as the sector produces almost 20% of the nation's gross domestic product and accounts for nearly half of all hard currency revenues in the economy. However, as there are some quotas for the Ukraine's ferrous metal exports on EU markets, the sector's export potential is not fully realized yet. If their quotas are abolished, we should expect growth in Ukraine's specialization in delivering ferrous metals to the EU. When looking to trade internationally, the Ukraine should specialize in exporting these metals, as this is the industry that they are best at producing. Hence, the Ukraine will be able to optimize their gains from trade. Australia will benefit from trade if they focus on resources and primary products, rather than attempting to produce goods or services in which they do not have a comparative advantage, such as manufacturing. Australia has been land abundant, capital and labour scarce, and thus its natural comparative advantage lies in the exploitation of those primary products. The Australian resource sector accounts for more than 70% of Australia's goods exports, and resource commodities make up 6 of Australia's top 10 goods. Australia also has the world's most diverse and plentiful mineral and energy reserves with a relatively unexplored surface. When looking to trade with other countries, Australia should produce primary products as it is their most efficient industry to maximise their gains from trade. To conclude all this information through in-depth research and evaluation, us, the Andy research team, believe that we have provided a comprehensive overview of the nation of the Ukraine. There have been a number of key takeaway points drawn from our research. This includes: Number 1. Ukraine is an overall loser of globalization, based on the violence it has caused as well as its shrinking effect in the economy. 2. The economic development of the Ukraine is far more significant than human development, as it provides an understanding of the country's economic instability, inflation rates, and access to finances. 3. According to Hofstede's cultural dimensions, Ukraine and Australia are disparate in every degree, especially in relation to power distance and individualism. And finally, based on the arguments of David Ricardo, we believe the Ukraine should focus upon production and export labour-intensive goods, whilst Australia should focus upon resources and primary products. These overall conclusions should be able to equip Australian firms with essential knowledge needed before venturing into the Ukraine. Furthermore, we hope that this presentation was able to give a valuable and in-depth analysis upon the strengths and the weaknesses that the Ukraine has to offer. Thank you for watching.